Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the Skyrim audio adventure. I am back. It is back. It's season 2, baby! Thank you, honey. I've got so much to say, but I'm going to save it for the end. I will not leave you waiting any longer. Here we are, Chapter 1 of Book 2 of the Skyrim audio adventure. Tangled Threads. Riften, the city on the lake. This, the capital of Skyrim's easternmost hold, the Rift, was shaped and molded by its proximity to Lake Honrick, the largest body of water south of the sea. Night had conjured up a fog so thick the bright sun could do little to thin it. The city sat only a 2-day ride from the border of Morrowind, and the uncanny winds of that land crept through the bordering mountains like breath through jagged teeth. They weaved themselves into the thickening fog, lending an eerie texture to the pale trees and rolling hills. A crow took off from an aspen branch and glided low over the lake. It flew with confidence despite the blinding fog. It drifted on silently, feathers dancing on the wind like a musician's fingers danced across an instrument. Out of the gloom came shapes, sharp and round, full and spindly. Nets and rods, rigged to boats, their bellies wide, their prows high. Lumpy figures, obscured by rags, peered at the crow from under hoods. The crow ducked under a fishing line and flapped its wings as the boats gave way to the tall, angled posts of piers, each brimming with men, mer, and lizard folk moving this way and that, carrying goods and tools to their next destination. As the docks went back, their edges spread and lowered, modest moorings for modest boats. Buildings and doorways next, their foundations submerged, boats parked in front like waiting carriages. A wall loomed up out of the gray, and the crow climbed higher, fluttering over the top and coming to settle amid a maze of interconnected rooftops. It folded its wings and clawed idly at a bit of moss on the rough but light shingles. The sound of that scratching carried down through the rafters into the second floor of the Bee and Barb Inn. Maven Black-briar sat in a secluded corner, well separated from the busy comings and goings of the patrons below. She sipped her wine and glanced through eyes narrowed from a lifetime of scrutiny up at the odd scrabbling above. Rats, she thought. Hopefully that was a sign that her associate would be here soon. The scoundrel was late as usual, and she didn't relish lingering in this place. Riften, the city of rats. The lake's influence on the business of the city paled in comparison to her own. The sweet scent of her meadery wafted through these streets, covering the smell of fish, filth, and foul play. Nothing moved in Riften without her knowledge. No stock was sold, no purse was snatched, no law was passed without her approval. Some who passed through the rift could be forgiven for thinking the power lay with Jarl Aela Lawgiver, the spineless twit who sat on the throne of Mistvale Keep. But those who lived here knew well that the true power rested in Black-briar Manor.
I see you're not imbibing in your own product.
She calmly glanced up from her glass to see that the seat across from her had been taken. A smirking man with shoulder-length ginger hair and a well-groomed beard sat in fine clothes befitting a well-to-do businessman, but his deft and silent approach revealed what he really was.
And I see your clothes are starting to fray at the seams, Brynjolf. Now how about we cut to business and not waste my time with such asinine observations?
Fair as always, Maven.
The man flashed a winning smile that didn't reach his eyes.
I know it took longer than expected, but the Golden Glow estate job is done. Took us some time to find the right man, or, well...
I am not concerned with that rabble you call a guild, or the difficulties you face plying your trade. What did you learn?
Arengoth has sold Golden Glow.
Foolish. To whom?
Here's the deed of sale,
Brynjolf said, handing over a sheet of paper.
We don't know the buyer, only the broker.
Maven unfolded and inspected it.
Well, this is no help. Who is this Gaduli?
We don't know. There might be an answer in our records somewhere. Marsa's looking into it.
About time he started pulling his weight.
We had Vipper tail one of the honey shipments. It was heading to Whiterun.
Ah, to Honningbrew, yes?
Exactly.
Well, that explains why that swill of theirs has become so ubiquitous lately. I'd wager the first of these discreet shipments occurred last fall, and they've been brewing through the winter. Golden Glow only cut me out once Honningbrew was ready to go to market. Yet Arengoth knows me. He knows my methods. If he planned to make off with the profit of the sale, why cut me out at all? Why make an enemy of me? He could have slipped away in the night, but no. He turned Golden Glow into a fortress and made himself a thorn in my side. Why?
Brynjolf shrugged.
Spite, perhaps?
No, we must dig further. The answer lies with the buyer. Keep an eye on Golden Glow. I hardly expect new ownership to just come waltzing up deed in hand, but we must be vigilant.
And what of Arengoth? That wood elf is bound to flee now that we know what he did.
Maven waved a hand dismissively.
Arengoth is already taken care of. Your concern lies in Whiterun. I think we've let those upstarts in Honningbrew run free long enough. Perhaps it's time we bring them into the fold.
I'll send word to Vipper to stay put.
No. Who was it that finally broke through at Golden Glow?
It was... I can never pronounce their name right.
It doesn't really matter. Send them to Whiterun. I have something in mind, and it requires skill and no small amount of tact. Things your organization seem to be in short supply of.
The guild is just having a run of bad luck. We've already started to turn it around.
Maven stood and made for the door. She paused next to the man and plucked a loose thread off the seam at his shoulder.
I'd certainly hope so,
she said, continuing on.
Your thread isn't the only thing wearing thin.
All Vantus had wanted was a quiet night with his wife and children. Perhaps even some stargazing. The skies had been incredibly clear and the moons would be low, the constellations ripe for storytelling. He was imperial by birth, but as he liked to think, Nordic in spirit, and if he could do one thing, it would be to imbue his children with a sense for the land he worked so hard to till. In the sky tonight would be the tower, the lover, and the guiding stars that first led Ysgramor to the shores of Skyrim. His ambitions were dashed when he heard the shrill wailing coming from the road. The tundra breeze chilled his balding head as Vantus came sauntering down from his house to investigate, and was met with the surreal sight of an honest-to-goodness jester dancing about a cart in the glow of twilight. Once he got closer, he saw that the jester was as pale and wan as a stalk of barley, with dirty blonde hair and a face that somehow managed to be both bright and sallow. His clothes were, well, that of a jester. Reds and blacks arranged in stripes under a pompous gold-trimmed collar, and a floppy multi-pointed hat tipped with little bells that, rather conspicuously, didn't ring as the strange fellow bounced around.
"Oh, no!
The man cried.
Curses confounded calamity!"
The reason for his distress became apparent when Vantus saw the state of the cart. The front axle had snapped. Now one wheel sat wedged up at an odd angle, and the whole front of the cart had bit the dirt. The horse was looking low and forlorn in its harness, and looked over glumly as he approached. The jester did quite the opposite. Apparently hearing his approach, the man whipped around and fixed him with a deranged, cock-eyed smile. Suddenly he was right in Vantus's face. He'd closed the distance faster than it felt like he should have, and was now standing much closer than any decent stranger would. Before Vantus could speak, the strange man was clutching at his hands.
Oh, hooray! A friend is here! Oh, please, kind stranger, won't you help me? Tragedy has befallen me, and my poor mother.
Vantus stepped back.
Easy there, stranger.
He glanced uneasily up at the cart. Mother? The cart looked empty from down here. Perhaps she was lying down.
Why don't you tell me what happened here?
Oh, well, we turned away some vandals as we were coming through the woods, but the cart must have taken some damage in all the excitement. All it took was a tiny pothole and crack, like a twig. Poor Cicero. Poor mother. Oh, what rotten luck. But you, yes, you can help me. A man of toil and rough hands like you will do nice things.
Vantus chanced to glance over his shoulder to where the bunkhouse sat on the hill. His laborers would be all holed up playing cards and fixing supper.
Well, it looks like what you have is a broken axle, and that's not an easy fix. It'll take time, and men.
He breathed a sigh, reminding himself that Skyrim was home to strange folk beyond count, and not all of them were dangerous.
My workers have all retired for the evening. Perhaps if we can get your cart out of the road, you and your mother can shelter with them until the sun rises, and we can get you on your way.
Oh no! Mother hates delays, and every second lost is an eternity to those who await us.
I sympathize, traveler. It sounds like you two will be mightily missed, but that's simply the way of it.
Oh, drat!
The sallow jester clutched at his hat and stamped his feet.
Come along now. Does your mother need help getting down?
I'll say more than you can give alone. Mother, we're coming around.
The jester called as the pair made their way around the back of the cart.
Come, and you spoke so highly of my...
Vantus trailed off as they rounded the corner. The area that would normally be for the seating and arranging of passengers and goods was taken up almost entirely by a large, black coffin. The material was dark as night and reflected the last glow of the dying sun. It didn't look like wood, but he couldn't say what it was. Blood-red hieroglyphs and runes lined its sharp edges. Depictions of bones and flowers were raised on its surface. They weaved and girdled with all the intricacies of a painting and all the sharp sheen of broken glass. The cruel, empty gaze of a human skull leered down at him from where the head would be. This bizarre coffin reeked of death, but the unknowable material cursed him with the sense that this whole structure had once been alive.
What in all the hells is this?
Vantus breathed, taking a step back. The jester climbed up over the side of the cart and smiled at him with a grin that was just a little too wide.
Why, this is Mother.
Next thing, Vantus was running in a dead sprint back up the incline to his house. The high strangeness of it all had become too much for him, and hospitality crumbled under the weight of instinct. He saw Kerwi, his wife, silhouetted in the entrance as he approached. He could see the apprehension in her elven eyes as he blew past her.
Lock the door,
he ordered, voice hoarse from the run. She was already sliding the crossbar into place. The Lorius family knew what it meant to live out here on a farm to the north. It meant isolation. Guard patrols were infrequent at best. It meant self-reliance. The family and their workers were the only ones they could count on. They needed to be calculated and deliberate with their actions. It meant danger. Myriad unsavory creatures were said to stalk this tundra and the dark wood above. All this culminated in one solid rule. If someone was acting distressed, you didn't second-guess it. The lock was turned, the board was lowered, the windows were boarded, and Kerwi Lorius had armed herself with a poker from the fireplace before she asked, "What is it?" Vantus was peeking through a crack in one of the window boards.
I don't know.
Even Voltus, get upstairs now! As her children ran to safety, the gold-haired she-elf stood next to her husband. What do you mean you don't know?
It was a jester, but he had a...
A jester? Like a clown from the cities?
Yes, straight out of a story. But there was something off about him. He has this...
Excuse me, good sir.
Came a voice from the door.
Clear off, you!
Vantus shouted.
But sir, that's just the problem. I thought we understood each other.
Well, we don't. And I don't want to. You stay away from us. We want nothing to do with you or that horrid thing.
Horrid thing? How dare you speak of Mother like that after she was so accepting of you?
Cease your babbling and get the hell away from my house.
Oh, curse you Nords are all the same. Simple brutes and skittish peasants.
Under normal circumstances, he would have been tickled at having been mistaken for a Nord. But tonight was far from normal. Vantus retreated from the window and turned to his wife.
Let's just get upstairs. I don't know what this is, but let's just wait it out.
Till daybreak?
Aye. That'll be bread and dried meat tonight. We'll be fine. You get upstairs with the kids.
So it was that the Lorius family hunkered up in their house, choosing to ignore the shrieking of the odd jester outside. The sun's glow faded to the west and the sky grew bright with the scintillating light of stars. All of it lost on the family of farmers inside. Vantus told his children stories from his youth, and Curwe read some of their favorite book, the journal of Ragamus the Resolute, chiefest and greatest adventurer of the land of Lothenric. When it was finally time to go to bed, the head of the family started reading A Comprehensive Alchemist's Assessment of the Soils of Northern Skyrim by Antus Lorraine. It took Evid a whole 10 minutes longer to drift off than Voltus. They might make a farmer out of her yet. The night was growing old. Voltus was in his bed, Evid was tucked into her mother's arms, and the candles had gotten very low. The farmer made the rounds to douse them one by one. When he pinched out the last flame, he was surprised to see a faint glow coming from the staircase that led downstairs. It was not impossible that he had accidentally left a candle burning near the table. In fact, with all the excitement of the night, it was pretty likely. He stepped down the stairs as quietly as he could. He did not know why. The jester knew they were in the house, and if he wanted to pull anything, he would be much less likely to do so if he heard a large Imperial tromping around inside. But still, he stepped lightly. It was just one of those things that people did on nervous nights such as this. From the landing, he could see the rogue candle flickering away near the cutlery drawer. Sneaking over to it, he licked his fingers and pinched out the wick. Some children would have been scared of a dark, quiet house, but not him. He was a man, and this was his domain. Some men would have carried the candle upstairs and doused it when it was no longer needed, but not him. He knew the layout of his home even in the pitch black. He was the master of his house. He did not fear the quiet, he did not fear the dark. What froze him in his boots as he turned back to the stairway was a small light drifting above the landing, illuminating an unfamiliar alien face with black eyes and a soft smile. He drew in breath to shout, but a slender finger appeared before the stranger's lips, and all at once Vantus realized that the figure was between him and his wife and kids.
You have a nice family,
Came a voice quiet and meek like the whisper of a field rat. It almost offset the unmistakable threat he felt coming from the figure.
I always wanted one just like it. Alas, the family I got wasn't interested in that kind of thing. I never really fit, you know.
He worked his jaw silently for a moment before he was able to whisper.
What do you want?
I was wondering if you and I could do a bit of business.
The light he now saw was a gentle star balanced on the point of an upturned finger.
I can pay you.
A second hand rose into the light of the first. It held a large satin pouch. Just from the sounds it made as it was lifted into view, Vantus could tell that it was heavy with coin.
100 gold to do a lot of people a great favor.
How did you get in here?
The door was unlocked.
My ass, it was unlocked.
He chanced to glance to the entrance and saw, to his dismay, that the crossbar had been lifted out of place and was doing nothing to keep the door secure. He slowly turned back to the wicked face in the dark. Its features, he now registered, were soft and tall, perhaps elvish like his wife, but different. The pouch of money had disappeared.
I'm surprised you weren't interested in the money.
I would have thought a family man like you could understand the value an extra 100 gold could bring. But perhaps I misjudged you. Perhaps you would just end up keeping that money for yourself. After all, you don't even care enough about your family to lock the door, or say, show a bit of courtesy to a guest.
Please.
Vantus said, hands itching to snatch up something, anything to use as a tool for defense.
Just tell me why you're here.
I thought we already touched on that, but you're right. I should explain. You see, I was just walking home when I came across this great big cart blocking the road, and this ridiculous clown was all whipped up in a tizzy, accosting me in the middle of the night and generally making a nuisance of himself. Seems his wheel is broken, and you refuse to help.
You're with that freak?
The dark figure chuckled and the light began to dim.
Oh, he was right about you. Oh well, I guess there's nothing for it.
No, please,
Vantus tripped over his tongue in desperation.
I can help. I just need to go get my men.
Oh, wonderful. I already spoke with them. Sturdy chaps. Just that they need your approval. So we have a deal?
Yes, of course. I'm happy to do business with all folk.
Excellent. In that case, I leave this matter in your capable hands.
With those final words, the light blinked out, and Vantus was left in the black of his once secure house. For a moment, he was still, letting the menace of the encounter drain out of him. Then a knock at the door startled him into action. He rushed to it and flung it open. Azul, one of his farmhands, was standing in the blue of the night.
Vantus,
The dark elf said.
I understand we need to fix a cart.
Vantus looked behind him to the pool of night glow that now spilled into his house. Sitting on the illuminated table was a heavy satin pouch.
Yes,
He said breathlessly.
I'll get the torches. You lot get everything we need to repair an axle.
Tell me, what's the difference between an arrow to the knee and one to the throat?
Will you please shut up and let me work?
Grumbled Azul.
How many times you have to hear the story?
It's not even funny.
Oh, you don't like that one.
Crooned the jester, scrabbling down the side of the cart like a spider.
I could tell you all my dark elf jokes, but they just get dunmer and dunmer.
By the uneven light of a handful of torches and the might of a bundle of hands, the laborers of the Lorius farm worked late into the summer night. They had hoisted the cart onto a stand and removed the shattered remains of the axle. Roderick was hastily sanding the new bar, while Vantus was extracting the wheels from the old axle and preparing them for the new. Azul was under the cart greasing the fittings and making sure the axle would be properly aligned. His brother Amon was seeing to the horse, while Alcus, Rani, Laveri, and Borgun were holding torches and offering the occasional hand. All of them were decidedly focused on the front of the cart, none of them daring to look inside the thing.
Vantus,
Azul began.
how much are we getting paid for this?
10 gold each.
Gold?
Gold, so just put up with him.
The farmer glanced up to his dark house and saw that one of the top windows had been unboarded. He knew his wife was watching him, nervous as she was.
You also have my eternal gratitude, kind strangers,
chimed the jester.
That means a lot, to be sure,
said Azul flatly.
Why did the Legionnaire leave the Imperial City?
Why?
He needed a little solitude.
Meh.
Tough crowd. Do you know the difference between a wolf and a flea?
The Breton woman by the horse perked up. "Oh, I know this one, actually." The dark elf shook his head. "Ronnie, don't encourage him. One howls on the prairie and one prowls on the harry." The jester grinned.
Clever! Some applause for the lovely lass!
There were 2 impotent claps from Laveri before the night fell back into the soft sounds of crickets and work. "Do you have any Nord jokes?" asked Ronnie.
Drop dead,
grunted Borgoon.
Oh, but of course! What's the difference between a Nord and a sack of bricks?
What is it?
Oh, I was hoping you'd know.
At this, there were a few stifled chuckles around the cart, and it was in this strained miasma of fear and begrudging levity that the group remained as they finished their work. The moon had started its descent by the time they mounted the new axle, and the cart was once again roadworthy.
Here,
Vantus said, passing a clean new lantern up to the jester in the driver's seat.
if you insist on riding through the night, you'll need this, eh?
Oh, why, this is a pleasant surprise. How oddly generous of you.
Yes, well, it's all been paid for.
Oh, nonetheless, you have my thanks. And of course, Mother's as well.
Right.
The farmer looked around at his workers, all of whom were milling about awkwardly, caught between the curiosity as to how well the cart would roll and the desire to keep a safe distance from whatever was in the back.
Safe travels, then.
And to you, new friends, a very good night.
There was a general pursing of lips, but no one said another word as the jester snapped his reins and set off into the night. The rattle of wheels on road faded away into the symphony of crickets and grass in the wind. Azul and the others turned to Vantus. "What was all that?" The farmer looked past his men to the now distant cart, and just for a moment he thought he saw the pale light and the terrible face grinning at him from the back. Next breath, it was gone, in the mist of his tired sigh.
Phantoms and Fae, who's to say?
unsavory at the very least.
Said Azul, shaking his head.
Unnatural's more like it.
Growled Borgoon. "I thought the jester was nice," piped up Ronnie. "You didn't see what was in that cart," said Laveri with a haunted expression. Vantus kicked some dirt.
Whatever it was, I'll say it's a night best forgotten. Off with you now, to beds.
Azul shifted his weight.
Will we be starting late tomorrow? Seeing as our night's been disturbed, so...
No, same time.
Vantus said evenly.
Can't wind up behind schedule. Go get some sleep.
The laborers grumbled as they sidled off toward the bunkhouse. They weren't happy, but they were professionals who understood the need for punctuality and that they would be paid for braving the odd ordeal. Vantus watched them go, poking and pushing at each other as they went. He lowered his torch and looked up and down the road. By the light of the stars he saw the fence posts that stretched out to the north and south. Many farms had roads that ran through them. He wondered briefly if he would hear such odd tales as he had procured tonight if he was ever to ask those men and women, "What's the strangest thing to come rambling down your road?" An ill wind blew out of the north, and he took the cue to make for his house. Lifting his torch, he trudged up the hill. If he were to think this was all some fey mischief, then he would expect the pouch of money to be gone when he returned, or perhaps to be filled with coal or mud. Just as that thought crossed his mind, the crickets around him went silent. It wasn't the usual drifting off as they all paused to tune their instruments. It was a sharp and definite end, as if the conductor had climactically clenched his fist. Vantus paused and raised his torch, peering into the dark. Nothing all around him but the gently waving grass and the bobbing white heads of tundra cotton. He breathed out his nerves, deciding he'd had enough of the bizarre and phantasmal for one night. He turned his back and stalked towards his home. He would not live to know the gravity of his mistake. Aella sat on the edge of one of Whiterun's many parapets. Her feet dangled lazily over open air, and her arm was hooked around a post as she drifted in and out of consciousness. With the beast blood burning in her veins, this was often the closest she ever came to sleep. If she was in a bed, she'd be up and down all night, chasing the scrabbling of vermin and the hooting of owls. Out here, in the clear night air, she could relax into the symphony of the landscape, keeping lazy tabs on the guards, the deer, and anything else that came through the fields below. Here she had sat, eyes lidded in unsleep from the chilly small hours to the first glow of the sun. She yawned and leaned back, pointing her toes as she stretched hard, feeling the blood trickle into her muscles. A bath. That's what she needed. A crisp soak in the rush of the White River would do wonders to drive the inertia out of her bones. Unfortunately, the river was a fair distance from here, and she had reason to be in the city at sunrise. A very gray, very crotchety reason. The springs up by the castle would have to do. She might even dive into the fountain behind the statue of Talos. Continuing her lithe stretch back, she let herself drop onto her hands and cartwheeled over to her feet. For a moment, she stood proud and straight. It was a simple maneuver for her, but it was well beyond the agility of tinkers, tailors, and clerks. Heck, even the twins might have had trouble with it. Then a fresh yawn grabbed her, and her shoulders slumped with weariness. She practically slid down the steps of the parapet and set off for the Cloud District. Whiterun was a tiered city. Within the walls, the Plain District was the lowest and largest section. It contained the homes and shops of the peasantry, as well as the main marketplace. Above, the Wind District held the homes of the well-to-do, landowners, nobles, and established men of means. It held Jorvaskr, her home and famed hall of the Companions Guild. It held temples and the Gildergleam, the spiritual tree of the goddess Kynareth. Aella brushed her fingers over the smooth contours of its bark as she passed through the great garden and made her way to the Cloud District. It was known almost entirely as being the home of Castle Dragonsreach, from whose lofty spires Jarl Balgruf the Greater watched over his hold. However, apart from those labyrinthine halls, it was many other things. It was home to a fine restaurant, the Golden Trumpet, that catered to the rich and royal. It was home to a series of plentiful gardens, now overgrown and neglected with the death of the Jarl's wife. And it was also the home of the main set of natural springs that provided this city with water. Over the years, the people have augmented the hill with channels and basins, and, yes, bathhouses. But there still exists a few little flows and falls where the water was left uninterrupted. It was into one of these smaller pools, just a few skips off the paved path, that Aella lowered herself with a sigh. The guards had marked her approach and paid her little mind. Being in the circle of the companions had its perks. When she veered off onto the rocky slope and started disrobing, they paid her even less mind. Being an extremely formidable woman also had its perks. The water in this pool was comparatively warm, having only recently been exposed to the chill of the morning. The Wolf of Whiterun stretched again, breath hissing through her teeth as the cold air danced along her bare, wet skin. A nasty, jagged scar just under her left armpit was the only thing that marred her otherwise marblescent figure. Her skin was soft as silk and firm as steel. Her hair would flash red as flame when caught by the sunrise, and she couldn't help but indulge in a moment of vanity as she admired herself. A cluster of small bubbles surfaced across the pool, and Aella froze. She hadn't done that. She struck out in a flash, and an instant later was wrestling with the underwater intruder. Her heart had jumped from the start of it, but with the clashing of limbs, she fell back into her element. Soon she found the stranger's throat and wrenched them out of the water like a hapless fish. Huge burgundy eyes blinked back at her from under a mop of snow-white hair. Perky breasts were caught by the light of the setting moon. This was a young woman.
What do you think you're doing?
Aella demanded, choosing to ignore for the moment the question of how she'd been caught off guard. The odd woman stammered.
I was just taking a bath.
You were hiding!
I thought you were a guard.
Much worse than a guard.
What are you?
I am the Wolf of Whiterun.
Aela hissed, drunk on the power she had over the young woman.
And you?
She began before suddenly remembering how they got here.
You were already in here.
Yeah?
The white-haired woman said, confused.
Oh.
Aela managed awkwardly.
Are you going to kick me out?
Aela hated when things got awkward. She was too good to be undone by a conversation.
No, I'm not.
She finally said with a sigh. She released the woman, retreating to the other side of the pool.
Sorry, you startled me.
Sorry.
No, I'm okay. Let's just establish that we're both sorry. All right.
So I can stay?
Yes, please. No, wait. I mean, no, well, don't please. I mean, just do what you want.
She finished weakly, feeling like she wanted to sink into the water and not come out.
Okay.
The strange girl sank back in up to her neck as Aela took in her curious features. Pale skin, snow-white shoulder-length hair, pointed elven ears, and something was snaking about under the surface.
Is that
The huntress began,
A tail? Yes, it is.
raising the furry appendage to peek out of the water like a river rat.
I thought I recognized you. You're the wizard's new lackey.
Well, assistant.
Right. So you're what, a mixed breed? Half Khajiit?
My father, yeah.
Aela settled into the water and began to scrub her legs with her calloused hands.
Interesting.
Are you going to say something about the hair?
What about the hair?
Sometimes when people find out about my dad, they start joking about how my mother could ever be with someone so hairy.
Nords say this?
Sometimes it's Nords, yeah.
Aela nodded solemnly.
Silly. Well, trust me, I have no leg to stand on when it comes to joking about excess hair. And if any Nord gives you trouble, threaten to trim their beards, and you'll be amazed how fast they change their tone.
Thanks.
The girl said, fingering a strange purple gem tied on a string around her neck.
What's that?
It's mine.
Aela shrugged and started scrubbing her arms.
Fair enough.
What's that scarf?
It was a bad time.
Oh.
The girl submerged herself up to her nose for a moment, red eyes gleaming across the water. Aela sighed as the conversation dragged. They had stepped on each other's toes, in more ways than one.
So, how's your bath going then?
It was going okay, before you almost strangled me.
Aela blinked.
Pretty sure I apologize for that.
I suppose so. How's your bath going?
Pretty good, since I almost strangled you.
To the companion's relief, the stranger cracked a smile, showing slightly extended canines. At least she had a sense of humor.
But seriously, it's good. A bit warm, but I can't complain.
Do you like it cold?
Not glacial, but yeah, it's a good way to wake up.
I think I might be able to help.
The woman said, perking up. Aela looked on curiously as the half-breed drew herself up slightly and closed her eyes. The moment went on for a few awkward seconds before the companion spotted the faintest sheen of ice crawling up the tips of the girl's shoulder-length hair. She drew air in through her nose and gently blew across the water. Her breath came out a cloud of frost and ice crystals that spread over the surface like a spider's web. Aela tensed as the cold front reached her, but soon smiled as the water took on a pleasant chill that sent goosebumps up her arms.
You're a mage?
She asked curiously.
Well, not really. Mostly I just break things, but I have a few tricks.
You're a destruction mage.
Aela nodded.
Is that how you wound up with Farengar Secret Fire? Are you his apprentice?
The woman waved her hands in protest.
No, I'm just an assistant.
I don't think most assistants do that.
Well, I do.
Have it your way.
Aela shook her head.
So, how did a mysterious woman like you wind up in the employ of the court wizard?
The young woman tucked her hair behind her ear.
I got caught pickpocketing him.
Aela's face took on a pained expression, and she couldn't help but cover her eyes with her hands.
I know. I am not exactly breaking new ground. A Khajiit thief.
Hey, I wasn't gonna say anything.
You don't need to.
Oh, thank goodness. So, are you paying off some debt?
Well, at first, it was just a way to stay out of the dungeon. But lately, it's been pretty fun. It's a bit like having a home.
That's good to hear. Just don't go snatching any more purses. Unless it's Nazim's.
Nazim?
The young woman's ears twitched.
I don't think I know them.
Oh, no wonder you've been having such a good time.
Aela chuckled to herself.
Sorry, I feel like we're doing this backwards. What's your name?
Nimrial. Nim, for short.
The young woman's tail swished back and forth beneath the water.
And you're the Wolf of Whiterun. Do I call you Wolf?
You could, though my name is Aela.
The companion dipped low and wetted her hair.
You're with the companions, right?
I am.
How did you join them?
I was practically born into it. My mother was with them, and my father's a friend of the hall.
So you followed your parents?
In a way.
And did you ever think about doing something else?
No. I imagine I would have found my way to this life regardless. It suits me.
I see.
Nim said, a pensive expression flashing across her face. Aela stood in a shameless stretch.
Nim, I'm glad you're finding a home here. And thanks for the chill. I've got things to see to this morning, though, so I'll be off.
Me too.
Nim said, standing, giving Aela her first unabated look at the bizarre joining of furred tail to pale skin.
I've been in here for too long anyway.
Oh, that reminds me.
Aela began as she pulled her trousers on.
What were you doing taking a bath before the sun even came up?
Oh, well, Farengar had, thing.
Aela paused, searching for the right holes in her shirt.
Like a bowel thing?
Oh, no, he had a nightmare.
Nim's brows furrowed as she pulled what appeared to be a fur skirt out from behind a rock.
It was a bit hysteric. Kept mumbling about black wings and big red eyes. It took me a while to console him. Then next thing I know is tearing apart his library looking for something. Wouldn't tell me what it was about. Anyway, I couldn't sleep with him darting around like that, so here I am.
Aela blinked.
That sounds like an ordeal.
I guess so.
You said you consoled him?
Aela said, smirking.
Yeah?
I don't think most assistants do that.
Nim cocked her head, seeming to miss the implication.
Why not?
Forget about it.
Aela sighed, stepping back to the path.
Well, you're welcome to come by Yavaskar if he starts mistreating you.
Thanks!
Nim said, tying on a minimalistic fur top that might have made Aela blush if she hadn't just had a cold bath.
But,
Aela clarified,
if you steal anything over there, we probably won't hand you a job. More likely, we'll string you up by your toes.
Nim danced from foot to foot nervously.
Fair.
She said finally, before darting off up the rocks towards the castle, as if the stairs didn't even exist. Aela chuckled as she watched her go.
Funny girl,
she muttered, then turned and made her way back to Jorvaskr. The day progressed much in the way of Whiterun days, calm and steady, almost still, then rushing forward with frantic bursts of activity, a quiet breakfast, a loud preacher crowing with the roosters, the focus of the merchants and peddlers setting up their stalls for the day, the burst of chaos as the market opens and criers drown out the sounds of frantic haggling. In this way, the days in Whiterun mirrored the sporadic gusts of wind that defined this rolling tundra. One such gust whipped up the flags of Jorvaskr as sleepy luncheon turned to heated sparring. Aethys spun and jabbed at Njeda from an extremely unorthodox angle. To his dismay, the shield maiden earned her name by easily blocking him.
Oh, You won't get anywhere that way!
Aela called. She leaned against a patio post, arms crossed, watching over the match, foot tapping with impatience. Aethys, for all his skill with a blade, seemed to think the way to get to Njeda's Stonearm was to dance around her shield, to duck, dodge, and deceive until he could concoct a move so fantastically unexpected that it led to the decisive blow. What he needed to do was consider the shield as part of his opponent, to strike, pressure, and even hook with strategic intent to move the shield out of position. She bristled at just how simple it would be for her.
Easy, Aela,
came a deep voice from behind her.
Sometimes the best lessons are learned, not taught.
Aela turned back to see Bracknell smiling softly at her as he sat next to a freshly eaten lunch. Kodlak Whitemane, the harbinger of the companions, was sitting next to him.
Is that supposed to sound wise?
Aela barked.
You learn a lesson like that out there, you die. Better to be taught while you have a second chance.
Fair point,
Bracknell conceded.
What can I say? I'm new to this whole retired business. I was wiser when I was on the move.
Kodlak patted him on the shoulder.
You're doing fine, old hound. Just squint into the middle distance more.
Bracknell cocked a smile.
Oh, is that the trick?
It is. That way, when you look right at someone, they take notice.
Makes sense. Hey, Ella.
The woman glanced back at them.
Get a load of this.
The old hunter proceeded to squint impressively at nothing in particular, a midday breeze tossing his long gray hair.
You look constipated,
Aela said, and turned back to the fight. Bracknell raised his eyebrows.
You hear that, Kodlak? She just called you constipated.
Very astute,
the harbinger chuckled. At just that moment, Aethys's corkscrewing attack ended rather predictably with him getting shield bashed and launched onto his back. Next thing, Aela was marching over to the old men's table.
I can't stand it,
she grumbled, pulling up a chair.
You know why he's doing this, right?
Kodlak pushed a tray of grapes over to her.
Do tell.
It's all because Stranger came waltzing through here and made getting pummeled and pounded and just punished until somehow getting a few lucky hits in looked like a viable tactic.
The most honored of all the companions stroked his beard.
Well, I suppose you need to take some responsibility for that.
Why?
Well, you're the one the tactic worked against.
Twice,
Bracknell added. Aela shot the old hunter a look that could kill before reaching for the plate.
Thanks for the grapes.
Stranger is something different,
Bracknell continued.
He's smarter than you're giving him credit, and you know it.
Smart?
Aela said through a mouthful of grape.
Sure. Tell that to the right side of his face.
Oh, you just worry about him.
I do not worry about him.
It sounds like concern to my ears,
offered Kodlak unhelpfully.
Okay, sitting here was a mistake.
Aela rolled her eyes.
Now I'm outnumbered by the two oldest children I've ever known.
Have you two heard any word?
Kodlak asked. Aela fell silent. It was Bracknell who leaned forward.
No word yet, but I know he's up there.
The old Nord pointed out to the land beyond the courtyard, and the three took in the stunning view of the mountains.
Up there, in that big chateau between the throat of the world and Bleak Falls Mountains. To the right a bit from the rapids, you can see the mist coming up.
My eyes aren't what they used to be,
Kodlak muttered.
Well, I need a looking glass myself.
I see it,
Aela said matter-of-factly.
Well, right about there, and about 2 fingers to the right. That's where my treehouse is.
You can see your treehouse from here?
Kodlak sat forward.
Aye, but only at night. When the fire is lit in the window, you can see a tiny speck of light, and 3 nights ago I saw it. He's up there.
Aela clicked her tongue.
You saw a speck of light?
Yes.
Through a looking glass?
Yes.
So you didn't see it. You were looking for it.
Your point?
Nothing. I'm just remembering how you teased me for worrying about him.
Worry is natural,
said Kodlak, squinting off at the distant mountains, or maybe some spot 20 feet away.
It's a sign of loyalty, friendship, and love. None of those are worth being ashamed of.
Aela chewed on that thought, clenching her fist. Ratty bastard, she thought. 3 nights ago was a long time. Just then a flock of doves came darting up over the wall and fluttered up towards Dragon's Reach. Aella stood. She knew those doves. They typically roosted near the city's front gate. If they were on the move, that meant some kind of commotion.
I've got a hunch,
she said absently.
I'll just be a bit. Brack, are you okay without me?
I'm wounded, Aella, not helpless. Go right ahead.
See you,
she said, and took off out of the Orvaskir courtyard and into the Wind District. The Wolf of Whiterun blew past the steps to the Skyforge, steps that had remained unclimbed for several weeks now. She descended to the streets, houses reaching up over her. Their builders had been ambitious, often building second stories wider than the first. The result was the feeling like some of the more ostentatious houses were leaning over her.
"Hail, companion!"
called a guard as she rushed by.
Hey!
She offered lamely. The man was far behind her before she'd even gotten the word out. Which guard was that? Balfour? Mogurd? Didn't matter. Spotting a large crowd of city folk clogging the street ahead, she leapt over a fence into someone's side yard and vaulted over an unsuspecting cow. Springing off the side of a house, she scaled the district wall and ran along the top for a minute before turning and jumping down to a set of eaves. She glanced to her right and found herself looking through a window at a very perplexed man with a proud mustache sitting at an office desk. She offered a winning smile and nod before continuing back to the city. She paused when she came for the second time that day to the Garden of Kinnereth and the Gildergleam. She took a moment, her breaths rapid but not fatigued, and took in the sight of the hallowed tree. The garden was in many ways the heart of the city, the lovely centerpiece that connected the 3 districts and provided a place of respite for the weary peasants and nobles alike. The central garden was ringed by a busy pathway, and it was around this ring that Aella saw a conspicuous gold sash, sprinting in the direction of the Cloud District. Aella sprung up and off a barrel, darting along the garden wall before effortlessly weaving through the sparse traffic to head the figure off as they reached the turn up to Dragon's Reach.
Triss!
Aella said, holding out her hands in a friendly but halting gesture.
Move aside, citizen!
The guardswoman panted, trying to push by. Aella's smile widened as she realized she'd gotten the guard's name right.
Oh, wait. Citizen?
The blonde woman blew some hair out of her eyes and nodded respectfully.
My apologies, companion. I am on important Whiterun guard business.
Aella smirked.
That much is obvious. What's happening?
I can't tell you.
Of course you can.
Triss cleared her throat, trying to push down her heaving to summon an air of importance.
I have a message for the Jarl's ears only.
And if it's anything that important, the Jarl will call upon the companions anyway, so why not just fill me in now?
The guardswoman deflated.
I'm sorry, Aella, but I can't.
The huntress opened her arms.
Triss, it's me.
If you continue to interfere, I'll have to arrest you for obstructing Whiterun guard business.
Hey, don't threaten me with a good time.
The guard flushed, though it might just have been from the running.
Please, Aella.
The companion placed a thoughtful finger on her chin.
Say, remind me, how many legs does your brother have?
Triss rolled her eyes in defeat.
2.
And who do you have to thank for that?
Okay, listen.
The woman said, leaning forward.
A rider just came down from Pale Watch. Lorius' farm has been attacked.
Shit.
Aella furrowed her brow.
Well, how bad is it? Was anyone killed?
Yes.
The guardswoman stepped around her and continued towards the castle.
Everyone.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Skyrim audio adventure. It has been far too long, and I am so excited to be back, and back with a nearly full cast. Casting these characters and working with these voice actors has been such a cool experience. I grew up on full cast audios like Graceling and World War Z, so this has been so special. Speaking of voice actors, let's introduce the cast. Aela was played by Kat Loveland. Vantus Lorius was played by Jorden Bates. Maven Black-briar was played by Nancy O'Fallon. The mysterious grinning figure was played by Jenny Mawite. Cicero was played by David Sledge. Triss the guardswoman was played by Kelsey Painter. And Kodlak Whitemane was played by Patrick McCook. As some of you might remember, the author to the Skyrim webtoon The Lost Goddess, Mafuriah, gave the character of the hunter a little cameo in one of her chapters. Now I have returned the favor and featured the character of Nim, or Nimrial, in the Skyrim audio adventure. And best of all, Mafuriah herself actually voiced the character, so it's really cool. Special shout out to new patrons Kenwa, Isaiah Ryle, and Saul Soto. Happy New Year, everyone. I hope you're all well and staying healthy. And here's a cheers to Season 2. And once again, thanks for listening.